Reddit is full of posts that start out sounding completely ordinary. A strange noise, a missing object, a photo that doesn't quite look right. Most of them fade into nothing. A few explanations, a joke in the comments, and everyone moves on. But every so often, one of these threads doesn't fade. It gets an update, then another, and by the end, what looked like a harmless internet story turns out to be something much heavier. A diagnosis, a crime, a warning nobody took seriously in time. Today we're going through 6 of those threads. Some of them were solved. Some were explained away. And at least one of them ends in a way that most of the internet never saw coming. Let's get into it. On September 29, 2022, a Reddit user posting as Liz Gillies put up a post in the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit that read less like a spooky story and more like a genuine cry for help. She explained that she shared a small dorm-style apartment with 2 roommates. Down the hallway, there were 2 bedrooms on one side, a 3rd bedroom on the other, and at the very end, a closet, shared storage that held her clothes, gifts, and a handful of keepsakes she cared about. She'd just gotten back from a 2-day trip to see her parents. She went to that closet to put some clothes away, and instead of a closet, she found a fully finished bathroom. Toilet, shower, everything like it had always been there. She hadn't been gone long enough for construction. Her roommates insisted the space had always been a bathroom and had no idea what she was talking about. And every item that had been stored in that closet gone with no trace and no explanation. Widespread, most posts on that particular subreddit deal in small stuff. An object misplaced for a few seconds, a flicker of déjà vu. This was different. An entire section of an apartment had apparently changed shape while she was away, and nobody around her remembered it any other way. Commenters split into 2 camps almost immediately. Some tried to help logically, suggesting she dig up old photos of the apartment to check whether that space had ever been listed as a closet. Others went straight for the paranormal, alternate timelines, parallel universes, even the idea that she might have died on her trip and woken up in a slightly different version of reality. The detail that changed everything. A commenter eventually asked her a simple, practical question. What exactly had been in the closet? Her answer was vague. Some clothes, old holiday gifts, jewelry, some other stuff she couldn't quite remember. On its own, that's not unusual. Most people can't inventory a closet from memory. But those missing items were her main proof the closet had ever existed. If her memory of the contents was already shaky, the surrounding memory of the space itself becomes worth questioning too. That kind of large-scale memory distortion, being fully convinced a physical space has changed, can be an early symptom of serious neurological issues, including certain forms of dementia or the effects of a growing brain tumor. But nobody in the thread raised that possibility at the time. Instead, the replies did the opposite. People shared their own glitch stories to reassure her that nothing was wrong, and some openly told her that seeing a professional wasn't necessary, or was even the wrong move. The update nobody wanted. About 2 weeks later, she added one line to the post. Edit. October 15th. I have a brain tumor. Suddenly, everything the thread had chalked up to a rift in reality read very differently. Brain tumors are well documented to cause memory distortion, hallucinations, and disrupted spatial perception, depending on where they're located. The most likely explanation is that her brain had generated, or badly distorted, a memory so convincing it completely overrode what was actually in front of her. She may have once lived somewhere with a similarly placed closet, and her mind blended that memory with her current apartment. She never posted again. Her account went silent after that edit. Given that survival timelines for some brain tumors average around 14 to 15 months, there's a real chance she isn't alive anymore, which means that Thread may have quietly documented someone losing their grip on reality while thousands of strangers cheered it on as something magical, instead of urging her toward the help she'd already said she wanted. On December 28, 2025, a homeowner posted to a paranormal subreddit under the title, "Please help, random bare feet and snow showing up in front yard." After a full day of rain and snow, they checked their backyard and found a trail of bare footprints circling near their car. Not slippers, actual bare feet, clearly imprinted in fresh snow. They set up a camera overnight. By morning, there were more prints, but the camera had caught nothing. Ruling out the obvious, early replies floated reasonable explanations: sleepwalking or even carbon monoxide poisoning, which can cause hallucinations and memory gaps severe enough that someone could wander outside barefoot with no memory of it. The homeowner shot both down in a follow-up. Nobody in the house sleepwalks, and none of them had been barefoot outdoors since the previous August. They'd also moved their Ring doorbell camera from the front of the house to the backyard specifically to catch whoever was responsible. It still caught nothing. No person detected, no motion triggered, despite prints that a grown adult clearly would have left behind. Why the prints felt wrong. The spacing was inconsistent, without the steady rhythm of normal walking. Some clustered near the car. Others sat right up against the windows, as if someone had been standing there looking in, but none of them formed a continuous path leading on or off the property. The subreddit did what you'd expect with that setup. Talk turned to spirits, skinwalkers, things that don't leave a trail. To the posters' credit, they seemed uneasy going that route themselves. They only posted there after the camera failed to catch anything. The more grounded read. The top comment cut straight to it. Someone was likely scouting the house, and it was time to invest in real security. A user claiming to be a reformed burglar explained the bare feet specifically. Shoe soles leave identifiable tread patterns that can be matched to an investigation. Bare feet or feet in socks are much harder to trace. Going barefoot may not have been strange at all. It may have been deliberate. One commenter did bring up the Hinterkaifeck murders, a notorious unsolved 1922 case in Bavaria where fresh footprints in the snow led to a farmhouse but never led away, and days later the entire household was found dead, apparently killed by someone who'd been hiding inside for days. It's a chilling parallel on the surface, but the details don't actually line up. The Hinterkaifeck prints led in and stopped, meaning the killer never left. This homeowner's prints showed no clear path in or out at all. Nothing inside the home was disturbed, and the pattern repeated over multiple nights without any escalation. As for the camera catching nothing, Ring doorbell cameras only start recording once triggered by motion, and there's a documented lag between that trigger and the footage actually starting. Combined with cold weather, a possible weak Wi-Fi signal, and a camera that had just been relocated to an unfamiliar spot, it's not hard to see how someone could slip through that gap repeatedly. The footprints stopped appearing after the third night. When it snowed again weeks later, nothing new showed up, suggesting whoever it was noticed the new camera and decided the house wasn't worth the risk anymore. What they were actually after was never confirmed. On August 2nd, 2014, a user posted an image with the caption, "Seriously creepy." A picture of a man with an axe on a decommissioned military frigate being broken up for scrap. The poster explained they worked at sea. Their ship had come into dry dock for repairs. the process where a vessel is locked in, the water drained out, and the hull left exposed for inspection. Docked beside them was an old military frigate, already stripped of anything sensitive, being taken apart for scrap after its crew had left it behind. A dock foreman named John went aboard with a camera to photograph the work areas, a couple hundred shots in total. In one of them, barely visible at the edge of the camera flash, a figure was peeking around a corner from the shadows, holding what looked like an axe. Why it wasn't just a shadow? John had been navigating the ship's interior with a torch, switching it off each time he stopped to take a photo, then switching it back on afterward. That meant when this particular shot was taken, he was standing in total darkness. Nothing but a half-second camera flash between him and whoever or whatever was in that doorway. Because the ship was military property, a police search was called immediately. Nobody was found. There was only one way on or off the vessel, covered by CCTV, and no way to safely climb down 25 meters onto concrete. No one was recorded leaving after the photo was taken. The image itself. Once it hit Reddit, users enhanced the brightness and contrast, which didn't identify the figure but confirmed it was unmistakably human. Not machinery, not a trick of shadow. What stood out most was the face. Nearly featureless, no visible reflection in the eyes, skin that red-gray and waxy. The leading theory was blunt but plausible. A homeless man who'd been sheltering inside the ship, startled by someone suddenly taking photos, grabbing whatever was nearby, in this case an axe, and peeking out to see what was happening. The setting supports this. The vessel was later identified by commenters as the HMS Cornwall, a former Royal Navy Type 22 frigate, the kind of massive, stripped-down ship full of dark passageways and partially sealed compartments that someone could live in undetected. A user who said they'd served on a submarine backed this up, describing how naval vessels are full of gaps and crawl spaces large enough to move through without being seen, which would also explain why a search turned up nobody. But only if the photo is real. Some users pushed back, floating the possibility of a friend in a mask, digital editing, or even a CPR training dummy staged in the corridor. Two details work against that theory, though. John was described as an old-school steelworker who carried a basic Nokia phone, not someone with an obvious motive or means to fake a viral photo. And when someone ran the image through a forensic analysis tool, it turned up no clear evidence of digital editing. That leaves two real possibilities. Either someone staged an extremely convincing scene in person, or John photographed an actual person hiding inside an abandoned warship, someone close enough to be caught in his flash, which also means close enough to have reached him before he ever knew someone else was there. On April 18, 2019, a user posted photos of a drawer, apparently purchased secondhand, with a message written inside, "The truth is under." Flip the drawer over, and the underside read, "The body lies at," followed by a set of GPS coordinates. The first instinct from most commenters was that this was a prank. Plenty of people admitted to writing similarly ominous notes as kids, hoping someone would find them years later and get a scare. Under normal circumstances, a post like this dies within minutes as a cute internet hoax. Then people checked the coordinates. Instead of pointing to an empty field or a random backyard, the pin dropped directly inside the Avon Park Air Force Range, a live military bombing range spanning more than 100,000 acres in central Florida. A user who owned property near the site warned everyone off immediately. The area sits inside an active bombing range littered with unexploded ordnance, not somewhere a civilian could casually walk into with a shovel. That's also exactly what made the location so unsettling as a place to hide something. If this was a hoax, the coordinates were oddly perfect. And if it wasn't, a live bombing range is close to an ideal place to conceal a body. Almost nobody goes there. The ground is already torn up from years of explosions, so fresh digging wouldn't stand out. And anything left near an active target zone risks being destroyed by later ordnance, erasing evidence over time. One commenter pointed out how easily someone with military access to the site could move through it without drawing attention. Cameras exist, but a familiar face knows where the blind spots are. The coordinates themselves were precise to 6 decimal points, accurate enough by GIS standards to mark a location within roughly 0.11 meters. That's not somewhere in this field precision. That's precise enough to mark a single grave. What happened next? As the post gained traction, someone contacted the Polk County Sheriff's Office directly, only to learn a homicide detective had already been alerted earlier that same day by someone else. But the situation stalled almost immediately. The coordinates sat near the boundary between Polk and Highlands counties, creating jurisdictional confusion, and since the site was active military property, any search required Air Force authorization before anyone could set foot there. The original poster said they'd share more once investigators looked into it. That update never came. The thread has been inactive for more than 6 years, and neither county's public records show any evidence a search was ever formally carried out. The far more likely explanation remains that this was a well-crafted prank that happened to drag both Reddit and law enforcement into taking it seriously, but without anyone physically checking that exact spot. It's never been definitively closed out either way. On July 20th, 2021, a Reddit user posted to the investigative subreddit RBI under the title "Police Didn't Investigate, and It's Been Bothering Me." Around 8:30 or 8:45 p.m., he got home from a quick trip into town. Getting out of his car, he heard what he first assumed was a TV left on somewhere nearby. Then he made out a woman's voice, screaming, "No, stop, you're hurting me, you're killing me," followed by a man's voice he couldn't clearly make out, a dog barking, and a repeated thudding sound. He called 911 immediately. The dispatcher could hear the screaming over the phone. Police said they'd send someone by. An hour passed. Nobody came. He watched his own security cameras for any sign of a patrol car. The sound was coming from across a narrow field, more than 50 feet away, near a small shack with a couple of cars usually parked out front. He posted 2 clips, one of himself on the phone with 911 while the screaming is audible in the background, and a second from a backyard camera aimed toward the field, where the screaming continues for several minutes, partially masked by an outdoor AC unit. Ruling out the easy explanations, because he lived in a rural area, some early comments floated a wild animal. Foxes are known for screams that can sound eerily human. He rejected that immediately. Foxes don't scream specific sentences like, "Stop it, you're killing me," and the male voice was far too deep to fit. Others wondered if it might be a movie playing loudly, or even something being filmed nearby. But between the dog barking and the rhythmic thuds happening in the same direction, most people landed on the same uncomfortable read. This sounded like someone being physically hurt, not performed. The part that upset people more than the recording itself. Despite the dispatcher being able to hear the screaming live, no officer showed up that night. When he followed up the next morning, the property still hadn't been checked, and the only guidance he got was a warning not to trespass himself, or he'd be cited. Commenters speculated the police might have already known something about the property or the people living there that wasn't being said outright. A theory that, while unproven at the time, wouldn't age well. The thread went quiet for weeks. Then, on September 7th, he returned with an update. Sheriff's vehicles all over the property. Officers in gloves walking in and out of the garage. One of them visibly sick in the front yard. Something had clearly been found, but no details followed, and the thread went quiet again. 5 months later, the full picture arrived. He posted a follow-up. About 2 months after his original post, that same property had been swarmed by police. He learned an elderly man there had died from a gunshot wound, ruled self-inflicted, reported by his own son, who'd been the only other person home. Then, the week before this update, he heard more gunshots. Not unusual for the area, so he didn't think much of it. It turned out to be that same son murdering his mother. The son initially tried to claim self-defense. He was charged with murder. The poster's security cameras had caught both the audio of the killing and footage of the getaway vehicle, and detectives had been collecting that footage from him for the past week. The names behind the case. The son was 40-year-old Tim Johnson, too. On the night of January 29, 2022, he told the Highland County Sheriff's Office that his 61-year-old mother, Stephanie Cheney, had taken her own life. But the scene didn't support that account. Bullet holes fired from inside the house, shell casings near her body, a loaded firearm magazine sitting on the living room coffee table. Under questioning, Tim confessed to killing his mother, claiming he felt threatened because she carried a pistol in her purse. He was sentenced to 15 years to life. Laid over the original recording, the picture darkens considerably. The woman screaming, "You're hurting me, you're killing me," back in July 2021 was almost certainly Stephanie. The male voice the original poster couldn't quite make out was most likely her own son, meaning that recording captured a small piece of a much longer, escalating pattern of violence in that home, one that would leave both parents dead within 6 months of each other. Given that Tim later tried to stage his mother's death as self-inflicted, it's hard not to reconsider his father's death months earlier, which had also been ruled self-inflicted at the time. Even the original poster raised that possibility directly in his update, describing Tim as someone now being looked at for both deaths. The hardest part of this one isn't the mystery, it's how preventable it looks in hindsight. If that first 911 call had been treated with urgency, the outcome might have been very different. On May 25, 2021, an image surfaced in the subreddit Morbid Reality showing a woman crouched at the edge of a roof, pressed into the corner, phone to her ear, and behind her a man climbing over the opposite side of the same roof. The caption explained the context. This was the moment a woman climbed onto her roof to escape a home intruder, only for him to follow her up. Why it read as more than a simple burglary. Burglars generally avoid confrontation. If someone inside notices them, the safer move is to run before police arrive. This man did the opposite. He followed her up onto the roof. As one top comment put it, someone that determined isn't just there for your belongings. Several users zoomed in on his right hand, where he appeared to be holding something that looked like a knife. The image wasn't clear enough to confirm it, but it was enough to shift the tone of the whole thread. What actually happened? The incident took place in September 2014 in Venice, Los Angeles. The woman was identified as actress Mallory Rivera. She'd been home alone, asleep when the break-in started. The intruder shattered part of her front door and reached through to unlock it from inside. Once she realized someone was in the house, she grabbed her phone and climbed out a second-story window, hiding beneath the edge of the roof to call 911. But while she was still on the line with the dispatcher, the intruder followed her out the same window. She was effectively trapped. The drop was over 20 feet, too high to jump safely. So her only option was to stay completely still and hope he wouldn't come around to her side before help arrived. Officers arrived within about 2 minutes and were able to talk him into surrendering on the roof, while firefighters brought her down safely by ladder. Who he was. The intruder was identified as 29-year-old Christian Hicks, recognized locally as a homeless man often seen in the area. His record showed 2 prior convictions, one in 2008 for carrying a loaded, unregistered handgun, and another in 2011 for injuring a spouse or partner. None of that explained why he specifically targeted her home. There was no indication of any prior connection between them. The clearer explanation came from earlier that same morning. Christian had already been detained around 7:30 a.m. after a neighbor spotted him wandering through someone else's yard, and witnesses described him acting erratically well before he ever reached Mallory's house. But the person who called it in refused to formally identify him in person, and officers were legally required to release him. Multiple reports described him as mentally ill and behaving unpredictably in the hours leading up to the break-in, which strongly suggests Mallory was never a specific target. He appears to have been drifting through the neighborhood in an unstable, paranoid state with no clear destination, and her house happened to be the one he entered once that spiral reached its worst point. Whatever state he was in kept pushing him to follow her. Even after she'd made it onto the roof, she made it off unharmed. But it's not hard to imagine how differently that morning could have ended if police hadn't reached the scene in those first 2 minutes. 6 different threads. 6 situations where the internet's first instinct, ghosts, glitches, hoaxes, wild animals, turned out to be covering for something far more grounded, and in more than one case, far more dangerous. That's usually how these stories go. The paranormal explanation is the comfortable one. The real one is almost always something you'd rather not have been right about. If you've ever come across a Reddit thread that started small and ended somewhere you didn't expect, drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And if you want more of these deep dives into the threads that never got the ending they deserved, make sure you're subscribed. There are more of these waiting. I'll see you in the next one.